All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Wellness Program Administrator here at Georgia State University's Employee Development and Wellness Services. By trade, I am also a registered dietitian. So before we get started today, just a couple of quick things. We are going to be recording today's session, so if you'd like to watch it again later or share it with a colleague who may have missed it, you'll have the opportunity to do so. We'll be sending a follow-up email, which will include a link to the recording, a copy of today's recipe, as well as a short survey where you can let us know what you thought of everything. During today's presentation, if you've got questions, comments, suggestions, we'd love to hear it. You can make use of the WebEx chat feature, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. So post any ideas you might have, questions that may pop up, and I'll be sure to answer and address those at the end of today's presentation. Without further ado, we will go ahead and jump into things. So today we're going to be making vegan walnut tacos. This was something that I came across a couple weeks ago and thought was really interesting. There are restaurants that apparently serve walnut tacos, but I myself had never tried it before. So I thought it'd be fun to make one at home and experiment with the recipe. And I can report back to you and confirm that they are in fact very tasty. It's really interesting to be swapping out what would typically be meat or like a meat substitute for something like walnuts. It's not something I've done in tacos, but when we use the right seasonings, when we cook it, it all comes together really, really nicely. And it's a fun plant-based alternative if you're someone who's potentially looking to cut down on your meat consumption a little bit, or maybe you have a guest over who is trying to eat a more plant-based diet. This is a great option for them as well. In terms of equipment, today's recipe is very, very simple. You'll need a cutting board to chop up some of the vegetables, and you'll need a skillet and a stovetop for the cooking. Other than that, it's really just a lot of assembly, so we can save a lot of time and get things together pretty quick. So if you're trying to make a meal on short notice, this can definitely be a good one to lean on a little bit. So let's get started and talk about some of the ingredients. Since they are walnut tacos, as you might expect, we will need walnuts. And for the demonstration today, I'm actually going to be making a half batch. So when I send you the recipe, all the quantities I talk about today will be doubled on that recipe, and that version will make a total of 8 tacos, which is 4 servings. Like I said, though, I'm going to make a half one today just to keep it a little simple. Now, when you buy your walnuts, what you ideally will look for, if you want to save a little bit of time, will be chopped walnuts. If they're already chopped up like this into small pieces, that's great. It'll save you a few steps, and it means you won't need a food processor in order to do it. If you buy walnuts just in their full form, maybe you get a good deal on them somewhere, you can absolutely do that, but you're going to need a food processor to chop them up into smaller bits. We're not trying to make it into like a ground walnut or like a dust or anything like that. Just again, getting it to those small chopped pieces. So we're going to make use of 1 cup of walnuts while I'm making this half serving here. So I'll go ahead and measure that up and just put it into a small size bowl here because we're going to add some seasoning to it. Now, walnuts are a really excellent superfood. When we look at their nutritional benefits, they have a little bit of protein in them, like most nuts do. They also come with a bunch of healthy fats, specifically omega-3s. Now, a lot of us have probably heard of omega-3 fatty acids before. If you haven't, it is a particular type of fat that's associated with a lot of health benefits related to cognition and memory, especially as we age. A lot of people will get omega-3s from sources like fish, for example. But if you're on a plant-based diet or you're just looking to add more sources in, walnuts are an excellent way to do that. So focusing our meal around it is a good way to ensure we're getting those healthy fats. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to basically take your traditional kind of Mexican cuisine or Tex-Mex style seasonings and add it to the walnut. So instead of seasoning beef, we're just treating the walnuts like that. So I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of paprika. We're just going to add it to that bowl. 1 teaspoon of cumin, which is responsible for, I think, when we think of like taco meat seasoning, cumin is that predominant flavor. And then we're going to use a teaspoon of garlic powder and then a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So we don't need a whole lot of salt here. We're going to add some flavor in a couple other places so we can keep that to a lower amount. Once you've added that in, you can just grab a spoon and just kind of mix it around. If you did buy full walnuts and you're using a food processor, you can actually add the seasoning into the food processor when you're chopping it up, and that'll help mix it. So just trying to get a little bit of the seasoning on all the walnuts there. So very straightforward so far. What we're going to do next is we are going to move the walnuts to the skillet, and then we'll come back here and work on some of the other items in preparation for the tacos. What you'll want to do is you'll want to set your skillet or your stovetop to a medium-high heat. And I'm going to add just like a teaspoon of oil to it. We don't want to heat up the pan with no oil in it, but we also don't need to add a whole lot of oil because walnuts are high in fat. So I don't want to add a whole bunch of additional fat to this recipe. It's already balanced pretty well around these. So again, just about a teaspoon or so, enough to coat the bottom of the pan. If you've got cooking spray, that will work too. So I'm going to walk over here and we're going to transfer this to the stovetop. Again, setting my burner to a medium-high heat, adding just a teaspoon of oil. So we'll let that heat up for just a second. In terms of cooking, it's going to be incredibly simple. So I'm actually going to keep the camera position here. We don't really have much to show you over there. We're essentially going to throw the walnuts on the skillet and we're going to roast them for about 5 minutes. That's roughly how long it takes for them to get that kind of toasted flavor, have that seasoning develop a little bit more over the heat. So we've heated up the oil. I'm going to move around the pan to make sure it's cooking. And any seasoning that gets left behind in the bowl, you can scoop in if you need to. Most of it should come out. And then the walnuts. I can show you what that looks like. We're just trying to flatten it out. It kind of looks like ground beef already, actually. We're going to flatten it. And like I said, it'll be about 5 minutes total that we'll want to cook that for. Once we're 4 minutes in, we're going to add a couple other ingredients to it to heat them up as well. But for now, we're going to start prepping some of our vegetables. So today we're going to use pretty traditional, taco toppings. I'm going to use lettuce. You're going to want about a cup of just romaine lettuce or green leaf lettuce, and we're going to want it to be shredded. So I've gone ahead and rinsed these 2 leaves, and I'm just going to line them up like this. I'm going to curl my fingers to protect my fingertips while I cut. And we're just going to cut thin strands like that, cutting it into strips first as we move down the leaf. And leafy greens are, of course, very nutritious. They're high in water content, so it can help you meet your fluid needs for the day. They're a good source of fiber. They're also a good source of vitamin K and vitamin A as well. So a lot of nutritional benefit there. Now, I've cut them into strips. I'm going to turn them perpendicular like this, and then just run the knife down against the other way so that these pieces can be a little smaller. I don't want a big long strand whenever I bite into it. And you can run it back together, run your knife through a couple times if you see any longer leaves. And then we've got some shredded lettuce set up, nice and easy. And I'm actually going to turn my attention over here. I'm going to use a spatula and just shuffle the nuts around a little bit. We don't want them to get burned on the bottom, so periodically I'll just shift them. You can also just shake the skillet. Okay. We'll come back over here, and the other topping we're going to be using is a tomato. I'm using 1 Roma tomato here. You're really welcome to use any tomato type you like. I like these because I think they're a little easier to cut than some of the others. What we're going to do is dice it. So I'm going to cut into it almost all the way down to the bottom. Not quite. We're leaving a little bit of attachment there. That's going to help it stay together as we cut, make our job a little easier. So almost just as far down as you can go without fully cutting it. And we'll continue that process moving along. And then just like we did with the lettuce, I'm going to turn it and we're going to cut in the other direction now. And tomatoes are incredibly nutritious. I know we've talked about them several times in different cooking demos. They are a great source of vitamin C, which is important for our immune system. They are also high in an antioxidant called lycopene. So antioxidants have some cancer-fighting properties, very, very good for us to have in our diet. Tomatoes are also a good source of fiber and water, just like any other vegetable will be. Okay, so we've cut those up. We're nearing the 4-minute mark on the walnuts. So what we're going to do now is I have half a can of black beans here. I've drained and rinsed them, and I'm just going to add them to the walnuts. We're basically just trying to heat them up to get them nice and warm to mix in with everything else. That's going to add a little bit of liquid to the skillet, so you may hear some sizzling. Okay, And then we're going to add two things for flavor now to the walnuts. We're going to do half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and then we're going to do half a teaspoon of reduced sodium soy sauce. It's going to add a little bit of sodium, a little bit of that acid through the vinegar, and it's going to be some nice flavors. So we'll go ahead and add those in now. So again, half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And then half a teaspoon of reduced sodium. And I'll grab my spatula again and just shift things around. We're going to turn the heat off now because we've reached our 5-minute mark. And I'm going to move that off of the burner. I don't really want it to continue cooking, so I'm going to let the pan cool for just a second on a different part of the stovetop. So let's come back over here and continue getting the rest of our taco ingredients ready. So we are going to use corn tortillas today. These are designed to be just smaller tacos, kind of like street tacos would be, so nothing huge. If you prefer, though, if you want to do like a flour tortilla, maybe doing a whole wheat one, you can absolutely tack more of the filling into it and just make a larger taco, or even potentially make sort of a burrito out of it if that's your preference. Today, though, we'll be sticking to the recipe and just using some corn tortillas. Now, corn tortillas are very small and they're a little fragile. They have a tendency to break if you fold them while they're at room temperature. What you can do, though, is if you heat them up either on the stovetop, or I'm just going to pop them in the microwave for about 10 seconds. When they're heated through, they become a lot more malleable and flexible, and then we can bend them without quite as much worry about them breaking. That said, I always make a mess when I eat tacos anyway, so I do what I can, though. So like I said, we're going to heat those for just about 10 seconds. You don't want to do too much more than that in the microwave because things do heat up. Right. And just to show you what the walnut and bean mixture looks like now, hopefully that gives you a good perspective on it there. So visually, the walnuts, they kind of pass for ground beef. Flavor and texture-wise, though, it is going to be very different. So if you're someone who enjoys ground beef, don't go into this expecting it to taste like that. That's not really our goal. We're not trying to substitute the texture of it. We're really just trying to get nutritional benefit with some protein and some healthy fats. So try to think of it that way. It's a very new experience, and I definitely encourage you to try it and see what you think of it. So now what we're going to do is we will go ahead and plate our tacos. So I'll just grab 2 tortillas here. I'll leave my spatula and just scoop some of that bean and walnut mixture in. Like I said, I'm doing a half serving right now. So I'm trying to portion this out. It should make a total of 4 tacos. So I'm going to use about half of what's in the pan right now to demonstrate these 2. And the cumin, the paprika, the garlic powder all work together really nicely to give us some of that just, Mexican cuisine flavor. It's really good. A little bit of spice, nice salt in there. So at this point, we can go ahead and top the tacos. In terms of vegetables, you can use anything you want here. If you like jalapenos, I know I'm a fan of spicy stuff, that would go great here. We'll keep it more traditional with just the lettuce and tomato today. So I'm going to grab some of the diced tomato and just put those on there. And then we'll get some of that shredded lettuce, bring in that papa green, like I said, a little bit of vitamin K, a little bit of vitamin A. Now, at this point, if you're someone who likes very plain food, this is a great stopping point. It's going to have some salt to it. It's got some good flavors, but I definitely want to take it a little bit beyond that. I think the tacos are a little simplistic right now. So we've got 2 things we can do to add flavor. You might add a salsa if you've got one in your fridge that you like, or you want to make salsa or buy a fresh one. That's a great option. I'm going to be using something that's really, really spicy today. I'm a fan of heat in things. So for one of these tacos, I'm going to dish some of this salsa onto it. And that's definitely going to add some additional flavor. And then the other option you have is, now this part, you'll have to choose vegan yogurt or vegan sour cream if you want it to stay vegan. Up to this point, we're fully vegan with it. I'm actually going to use plain Greek yogurt today as my sour cream substitute. The reason I like doing that is that plain Greek yogurt adds a lot of protein to things, so that's a nice nutritional benefit. It's also got some calcium and vitamin D in it, so we're getting a good mix of additional nutrients on top of what we already have. Plain Greek yogurt, if you've never used it like sour cream, it's still got that nice cooling sensation to it, very, very similar flavor-wise, with some nice health benefits. So I'm going to grab another spoon, actually, and just get like a dollop of that and put it on top of the taco there. So again, you can flavor that with whatever you like, whether you want to do salsa, pico de gallo, some sour cream on top of it. And there you go. You get some nice looking vegan, minus the Greek yogurt, vegan walnut tacos. So again, you can use a vegan sour cream if you're really looking for that flavor and want to keep the whole thing plant-based. Now, these do really well in the refrigerator. You can pre-chop the vegetables like this, put them in an airtight container, and they'll be good for about 3 days before the texture starts to kind of degrade a little bit. Tomatoes tend to go faster. If you really want to keep the tomato intact, you can wait to chop it up until you're going to eat it, and that'll make the texture a little bit nicer. The walnut and bean mixture, though, you can keep that in the fridge for up to about 4 days, so it holds really nicely. Whenever you want to eat it, I would recommend just microwaving the tortillas, microwaving the walnut and bean mixture to get it back up to that nice hot place. I think the sensation of the warm filling with the cool tomatoes, lettuce, and sour cream is really, really pleasant. So in terms of other nutrition information about this, this is really well balanced around having healthy fats, healthy carbohydrates, and a good source of protein too. So this is a diabetic-friendly meal. We're keeping the carbohydrates in a very healthy range. We've got some black beans and we've got some corn tortillas, but there's nothing to really jump it up a lot. It's very low in sugar overall, just focusing again on those healthy carbohydrates, the healthy fats, and the protein. So that's really it. Like I said, this is a super fast recipe to make. If you don't talk as much as I do, you can get through it in honestly about 7 minutes is what I did whenever I was preparing for today's demonstration. So great to whip it up for yourself, for others. If you've got kids who are picky, you can definitely simplify things. Like I said, the salsa and the sour cream. I know I was a picky eater when I was a kid. You know, you can leave that off and they may really enjoy it. You could also add a little bit of cheese to this. If you're someone who's not fully vegan, that could definitely add flavor. Or set up sort of a taco bar where people have different options like jalapenos they could top it with, lettuce, tomatoes, bell peppers, corn, things like that. So get creative. I think the walnuts make for a really interesting and fun foundation in place of ground beef or another animal product. So I see we've got a couple of messages. I'm going to take a look at those here. All right. So here's a question. What can I use as a substitute for walnuts? So the idea behind using the walnuts in this recipe is that walnuts are very savory. They're high in healthy fats, and they work well as you toast them here. You could technically try this with any form of nut out there. You'd go through the exact same steps. You'd want them to be chopped up into small enough pieces. Like I wouldn't use whole almonds, for example. It'd be a little unpleasant to bite into. But if you wanted to grind them up into smaller pieces, you could try the same approach here. Their flavor profile is a little different than walnuts. I do think walnuts work the best for this recipe, but you could certainly try it with almonds, with peanuts, things like that, just to see how it plays out. So if you're not a big fan of walnuts, there are definitely some other options. At the end of the day, we're really just making a traditional taco and trying to use a nut as the base for that protein. So flexibility there for sure. I see another question here. Are the walnuts crunchy after toasting? Great question. I'm sure some of you are kind of thinking, okay, we're substituting walnuts for ground beef. Ground beef is pretty soft whenever it comes time to eat it. And, you know, walnuts are pretty crunchy. The walnuts do stay crunchy. They do not soften significantly at all. In fact, depending on how long you cook them, they may even get crunchier if you cook them for a little too long. So it's a little different biting into the taco and having that crunch there. But like I said, I encourage you to not think of it as a one-to-one for ground beef because the textures are just completely different and the flavors are pretty different too. However, it is a very satisfying and filling for the taco. When I had these earlier this week while testing them, I was very, very satisfied after the meal. I felt like I had the right amount of food. I didn't feel too full or too heavy, but I wasn't hungry either. So they are crunchy. It's a little bit of a different experience, but I think it lends itself nicely, and it's just refreshing to try something new like that. I will say walnuts are not cheap. The usual price of like a bag of walnuts like that, it can be like $10 or $11 depending on where you're at. What I do recommend doing, I like walnuts. I enjoy the omega-3 nutrition benefits, so I put them in on top of my oatmeal. I'll put them in cereal. I'll do stuff like this with them. Really, really great snack too. But I always try to buy them when they're discounted. If you shop at Publix or Kroger, they will frequently run either significant sales, or Publix does buy one, get one on walnuts all the time. That's when I snatch them up. I don't like paying $11 for walnuts. I would much rather pay $5.50 for walnuts instead. So keep an eye out for sales. If you buy them in larger quantities, it definitely saves you a lot of money as well. Or if you're someone who wants to experiment with another nut in place of the walnuts, you may be able to find a more affordable one that could work for you. Okay, here's a question. Can you soak the walnuts to soften them? I'm going to be honest with you, I do not know the answer to that question. I don't know how that would work with this recipe. I don't want to give you an answer without having a lot of information behind it. So I'd encourage you to look that up, see if you can find other recipes on the internet where maybe they do something like that to try to soften it. A lot of times, if you find a technique used in one recipe, you can potentially carry it over. But I can't really offer advice on that because I haven't looked into it or tried it yet. But I'll try to do some research today and see what I can find. Here's a question asking can you review the ingredients you mixed with the walnuts again? Absolutely. And I'm going to tie this in with another question I got, which is, would salted walnuts be okay? So we'll combine these. So the ingredients that I combined with the walnuts, it was walnuts with seasoning. So it was paprika, cumin, garlic powder, and then a little bit of table salt, just a quarter teaspoon. So those are the seasoning mixtures. And then at the very end, the last minute of cooking, I added in black beans, and then I added in apple cider vinegar and low sodium soy sauce. Those bring out some interesting flavors by adding a little more salt and then a little bit of an acid in the form of the vinegar, which works really nicely together. If you have salted walnuts, which I see someone asked a question about, you can absolutely use those. All you'll want to do is just remove the salt that you would add in with the other seasoning. So if the walnuts are pre-salted, just move the salt out, stick to the garlic powder, cumin, and paprika, and then you'll basically have the same mixture there. So that'll still work out very well. Okay. I don't see any additional questions at this time. So again, we're going to send out a copy of the recording from today. We put it on our EDWS YouTube channel where you can view this session, past cooking demonstrations. We've got virtual workouts on there, meditation, yoga, all sorts of great programming. So we encourage you to check that out and visit the YouTube page. We'll send out a copy of today's recipe as well with the nutrition facts, so you can see how they might fit into your diet and your lifestyle, and you can follow the steps at home to give the recipe a go. I always tell people I'd love to hear what you think of it. I have some people out there who will make recipes and send me photos of how theirs turned out, or if they made any substitutions or ingredient swaps, and I love to hear all about that. It's really exciting to see people make it their own. So if you want to share something with me, definitely encourage it. And then if you are not already on our mailing list, we do events like this all the time. I mentioned we have virtual workouts, we have support groups, we've got meditation and yoga, and we're constantly looking to add more to what we're offering. So if you're interested, you can actually email us at edws@gsu.edu, and we'll put that in the chat here in just a second. And then you can get added to our mailing list. So every week you'll know what we're doing, what kind of events we're offering. We do these cooking demonstrations twice a month. So in another 2 weeks, we'll be offering a brand new recipe. So if you're interested, I definitely encourage you to check it out. And I see Tony just put the email in the chat there. Thank you, Tony. So again, if you're not already receiving our emails, please send us an email. We'd love to get you added to it, and we can hope to see you at more of our events. So with that being said, thank you everyone so much for attending today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.